I'm Jeff Ashcroft, and over the next 55 minutes or so, I'll be taking an in-depth look at the two most popular groups of competition tractor used for tractor pulling. These are stock tractors, which include Pro Stock and Super Stock machines that are based on farm tractors, and there are modified tractors, which are the dragster type machines producing thousands of horsepower. Rules specify what tractor limits are in force, and also what special materials must be used on tractors and drivers to maintain a high degree of safety for all involved with the sport. But before we look at the technology used in these competition tractors, we need to take a look at how the sport operates to get an idea of exactly what these tractors need to do. It's a popular misconception to think that tractor pulling is a team of men trying to pull a tractor on a rope, or even tractors trying to pull each other. It's not. It's a sophisticated motorsport where the objective is to pull a weight as far as possible along a 100-metre dirt track, making full use of driving skills and tractor power. But the weight that's pulled is not just a solid weight. It's a sophisticated piece of equipment known as a weight transfer sledge that does a lot more than just tow along behind each tractor. At the start of each pull, the weight transfer sledge acts as a rolling weight to allow tractors to get away from the start line. Then during its progression along the track, the sledge's characteristics change into that of a dead weight by transferring all its weight onto the back of the pulling tractor. It does this by using a sliding ballast box on its chassis, which is mechanically driven by the sledge's wheels. As the sledge is pulled along the track, its ballast box advances forward along the sledge chassis towards the pulling tractor, and while doing this, its weight is then gradually transferred from the sledge's wheels onto a large skid pan at the front end of the sledge, increasing the weight that the tractor has to pull. This can be as much as 100 tons. By using a series of gears, the sledge operator can determine how quickly or slowly the ballast box moves up the sledge. This load can be varied further by adding or removing weights from the ballast box. This is particularly important for the different weights of tractor taking part. The distance the weight is moved is accurately measured to the nearest centimetre by laser beam, so there can be no arguments as to how far the weight has moved. Competition is also policed by flagmen at each end of the track to ensure there is no foul play or dangerous driving by competitors. After each pull, the weight is repositioned at the beginning of the track, and the track surface is also graded and rolled so that each competitor has a firm, even surface on which to drive. In theory, each competitor gets to pull under similar conditions, so no one has an unfair advantage. The modified tractors compete at 4 weight levels. These are 2.4, 3.4, 4.4 and 5.4 tons. Stock tractors compete at only 2 weight levels, 3.4 and 4.4 tons. Before each tractor class competes, all machines entered in that class are passed over a weighbridge by the track to check that the maximum allowable weight is not exceeded. It is here where weights are removed or added depending on the class entered, and where disagreements can often occur. It seems like nobody wants to lose weight, and creating the right amount of traction is what pulling is all about.
30 over.
Yeah.
To the one.
Tyre pressures are set according to track conditions. Their adjustment can have a tremendous influence on performance and also on the drawbar height, which must be set at 50 centimetres from the ground. If it was any higher, it would mean an unfair advantage was gained by some competitors, so the drawbar must be adjustable. Even if you think everything is in tune to perfection, all that horsepower can have a mind of its own. You'd be forgiven for thinking that the machine with the most power will win, but it's not always the case. Track conditions, driver ability and tyres all play a vital role in moving the weight as far as possible along the track. But getting a grip on the track is not as easy as you'd think. Tyres with plenty of tread do grip, but they also dig up the track surface, throwing soil in front of the sledge and increasing the load that you're trying to pull. So large cleats, like those found on conventional tractor tyres, are out. You need just the slightest amount of tread to avoid all that soil build-up. Those in search of maximum horsepower need look no further than the modified tractor division, where multi-engine tractors produce thousands of horsepower with relative ease. Depending on the way tractors are set up, wheel speeds in excess of 100 miles an hour are easily achieved by modified tractors. There's no doubt that if you've got the power, you've got to spin the wheels. But for sheer engine tuning ability, we need to take a close look at the stock tractor division, which has to use tractors based on standard factory-produced machines. That means the stock tractors must retain their identity, along with a standard engine block, crankshaft, gearbox casing and rear axle casing as intended for that model by the original manufacturer. But there's nothing to stop you fitting other parts within. Visually, Pro Stock and Super Stock tractors are similar, but get behind the engine panels and the real differences start to unfold. Pro Stock tractors are allowed only one turbocharger, albeit of any size. The Super Stockers, though, can make use of up to 4 turbochargers on the one engine, and it is these high-performance machines we'll look at in detail. One of the top Superstock tractors in Europe is the JBJ Express. It's based on a John Deere 4230 tractor and is a long way away from the 130 horsepower farm tractor that it once used to be. With a smart outward appearance, the only real inclination of what lurks beneath the bonnet might just be given away by the twin exhaust pipes. Its 6-cylinder diesel engine now revs over 5,500 RPM, and with 4 turbochargers is estimated to produce 1,500 horsepower. To find out how the JBJ Express generates all its power, I spoke to the tractor's owner, Peter Clark. Peter, you've been involved with these Superstock tractors for a number of years now. So tell me, how do you get so much more power from these engines than they're really designed to give?
Well, yes, that's a long story. We've learnt a lot over the years. We watched the Americans pull and one thing and another, and when we first started, we thought it was just getting an old major and putting it together and put a little drop of fuel in, and we thought we got a lot of power. But nowadays, it's getting quite technical. We're using a lot of fuel in this tractor, a lot of air, a lot of turbochargers on here, as you can see, and that's what's making the horsepower in this tractor.
But producing so much extra power must mean that there are extra stresses and strains imposed on the engine components. What measures have you taken to gain some form of reliability from this John Deere engine?
On this particular engine here, we've got a girdle that is placed between the sump and the rear at the bottom of the engine, and this goes right across the main caps, across the bottom of the block, and it holds the complete bottom end together.
Because of the girdle's construction, the oil sump can no longer house the standard oil pump system, so an external oil pump has to be fitted. From here, oil is filtered. So let's have a look at just how accurate your oil filtration system is.
Well, Jeff, instead of using the old paper system where you just screw them on like you have on your car and your ordinary tractor, we did away with that. And we're using this Oberg filter, and it has a inlet here, an outlet. Oil comes in, oil goes out. And the idea is we can take it apart, and inside we have a gauze, a fine gauze, and the oil is coming through this, and we can take it apart, and we can actually look at this just to see what we're filtering. Now, generally speaking, there's a few bits, but if there's a lot, we know we have a problem, so we start looking at things inside the engine.
The conrods are basically John Deere items, but have been hardened to reduce the risk of breakage, and the rough edges smoothed off. The pistons have been modified, the tops having been machined out, making a deeper well and allowing more room for the valves due to the extra lift from the reprofiled camshaft.
This is a John Deere liner. This is not a standard one. Standard one looks identical to this, but they're made of cast iron. And what happens with the cast iron liners, the sheer pressure bursts them. They just split clean down the middle, and of course you can't pull then. You just have water coming into the engine and all the problems. So this is made out of steel. Ductile iron, actually.
The valve springs have also been strengthened. The ones on the right are standard John Deere, but the ones on the left are specially made to reduce valve bounce at high RPMs. The cylinder head is from a 55 series John Deere engine, which has bigger inlet and exhaust ports. These give improved airflow and help to burn the extra diesel supplied by the fuel injection pump.
We have redesigned this pump to deliver a lot more fuel. It's probably delivering now 10 times more than the standard John Deere fuel pump. All of the delivery pipes are enlarged. These are running with a 3mm hole against a 1mm for a standard. We have got the large injectors, large nozzles. The standard John Deere injector nozzle runs about 17 gallons an hour, but these do 70.
70 gallons an hour.
70 gallons an hour.
That's an awful lot of diesel. In order to burn all that diesel, this tractor is equipped with 4 turbochargers, each one compressing air into the next, developing a vast amount of airflow and boost pressure by the time it reaches the manifold. Boost pressure in the manifold can be up to 200 pounds per square inch. This comparison shows the difference in size of a standard John Deere turbocharger capable of producing 200 horsepower, and the larger ones used to produce in excess of 1,500 horsepower for racing. The first stage of the turbo system consists of 2 low-pressure turbos at the front, which converge into a single pipeline and pump air to the second stage, which is a single turbo. And from here, the air is sent to the third and final stage, which is a high-pressure turbo unit, feeding the engine. Every joint has to be secured with metal plates, to withstand all this pressure, otherwise it would just blow apart. If for any reason the boost pressure is increased beyond that which the engine can withstand, there is a safety relief valve or wastegate, which on this tractor is set at around 185 psi. The heat generated by compressing air through the turbos has to be cooled, otherwise pistons would simply melt. This is done by injecting water into the air through a number of jets located around the manifold. As boost pressure builds up in the manifold, a pipe running from there takes some of the pressure and uses it to activate a valve called a Max Simpson water valve, named after the American who invented it specifically for tractor pulling. It allows the correct volume of water to be injected into the manifold to cool and condense the air for better combustion. In a 12-second run, this tractor burns approximately 1.5 gallons of water and 1.5 gallons of diesel. The extra horsepower that the JBJ Express now has requires strong clutch and transmission components. The standard single-plate clutch has been replaced by a Crauer-type racing clutch with 4 plates, and the original gearbox has been modified to carry 2 pulling gears to achieve wheel speeds in excess of 70 miles an hour. Safety is afforded by a shatter blanket around the cast bell housing in case of a clutch or flywheel failure. Such safety features are mandatory in all classes to protect tractor drivers and spectators. This cord at the back of the tractor is attached to the sledge driver's controls, and if he thinks the tractor is going out of control and there is risk to the public or driver, he can pull the cord and release these flaps which shut off the air supply to the turbos, immediately choking the engine. Such a system is fitted to all diesel tractors that use turbochargers. Tyres fitted to these Superstock machines are 30.5 inches wide and are much bigger than the Pro Stock tractors that are only 24.5 inches wide. These specific puller tyres that are made by Firestone have been hand cut to remove a lot of the excess rubber from the tread pattern. These are a double cut pattern and are able to handle the high amount of horsepower produced by this John Deere. Peter, why do you use aluminium wheels?
Well, Jeff, you know, when we're tractor pulling, the art is to get the tractor as light as possible. We go into the class at a weight. Now, with the aluminium wheels, we can lose a lot of weight here and on the rear and transfer the weight to our position we like to put it, i.e. right on the front to keep the front down, or on the back to give us more grip. So that's really the reason we use the aluminium, and also it sets the tractor off, gives it a pretty appearance.
To Peter Clark, having a tractor that looks good on the track is as important as winning, and like many other tractors, the JBJ Express has its own personalised artwork that sets it apart from all the rest. The Superstock division has an attraction all of its own, with plumes of dense black exhaust smoke and whining turbos. But in recent years, several diesel tractors have been drastically altered to run on pure alcohol. These alky burners have a clean exhaust and very different running characteristics. They sound different too. These engines rely on a spark ignition system to burn the alcohol fuel, where smokers rely on compression alone. That's the fundamental principle of a diesel engine. Traditional diesel enthusiasts will tell you that there's only one place for alcohol, and that's in a glass. But Willem Veldhuizen from Loosdrecht in Holland has recently earned a fair degree of success with his alky burner, Bits and Pieces. I chatted to Willem at his garage where the tractor is maintained. Willem, what are the advantages of running a superstock on alcohol?
Well, the biggest advantage that I can see is that we have 2,000 RPMs more to play with, so we can vary the wheel speed a little bit more. We can come out of the hole a little bit slower than somebody else, so that the tractor hooks in faster when you have a bad track. And another big challenge for us was to make it work on alcohols. There were so many stories that alcohol was difficult and that the weather has been a big problem here, and I never saw that as a problem. And we worked on it and it seems to work.
So you were looking for a little more reliability and a little more power?
Yep. And I think we found a really way more reliable motor and awful more horsepower. We never had expect that we could turn the tires close to 135 kilometers an hour in a 7,000 pound superstock. In comparison to the diesel motor we had, we run the tires then about 84 kilometers an hour.
So it's a considerable difference.
Yep, it's a lot of difference.
So what have you done to make this engine run on alcohol?
Well, let's take a look inside and so I can explain it. On the diesel motors you will find here your fuel pump, and in these holes you will find the fuel injectors. On the alcohol motor we took them out, put spark plugs in it, took the fuel pump off and put a distributor on it.
So how do you get the sparks from what was a diesel engine?
I will explain to you. This whole ignition system is triggered by this trigger wheel. We can change the ignition timing from 30 to 10 degrees. We run it close to 25 degrees. This here is the aluminum wheel with steel points on it. As soon as the steel points passes this center, it gives a signal to the MSD box. The MSD box doesn't give one spark, it sparks about 20 crankshaft degrees long.
It's a continual spark for 20 degrees?
Yeah, it's multiple spark.
So you get a lot of sparks in a short space of time?
Yep.
To burn the fuel?
Yeah, really concentrated. And it's capable of jumping about a gap of 10 centimeters.
So it's very, very strong?
Oh yeah, it's no problem to kill somebody with it.
Connected to the MSD box is the rev limiter. This is a small box to the right. The rev limit is controlled by a chip inserted into this box, and as you can see, this one reads 6,800 RPM. Changing chips can alter the maximum RPM by 200 RPMs above and below this figure.
From the MSD box there sends a signal to the coil, and the coil sends a 50,000 volt signal to the distributor. The distributor sends it to each cylinder, whatever the firing order is.
So using the magnetic pickup system on the front crankshaft pulley, there's no need to adjust the position of this distributor for timing?
No, we set number one on ignition, we line everything up that this rotor that's inside here points to number one, and that's it. And we drive this rotor, this distributor, with a belt coming from the camshaft.
So do you need a lot of battery power to run this ignition system?
Yes, you need a whole bunch of batteries, because when this is under full load, this MSD box draws about 36 amps out of the batteries, and it develops about 50 kilovolts. And we want to have the battery voltage as high as possible, because when you drop about from 12 volt to 10 volt, you lose about 25% of all your ignition power.
And is that not enough then to light the alcohol?
No, we want to go for as best as possible, because we don't want to have any misfires, because you can blow up your intake or put raw fuel in your exhaust.
Willem, running on diesel you used to have an injection pump to put the fuel into the engine. Now there are spark plugs here. How do you get alcohol into this engine?
Alcohol fuel is pumped through these lines, through these metering blocks. Every cylinder has 3 nozzles, one on the bottom, 2 nozzles on top. One nozzle is for the idle circuit, and the other 2 nozzles are controlled by secondary pump and primary pump. The amount of fuel is in relationship to the turbo pressure, is controlled by these boost sensors, who are mounted on top of the tank. In a matter of fact, what these things do is they are a variable return. The more boost there is, the less return there is to the tank, so the higher your system pressure is. Boost pressure is controlled by the wastegate. The wastegate is just a bleed-off valve for let go exhaust gas going away through the exhaust pipe without going through the turbochargers.
By connecting a fuel metering block to the throttle valve, air and fuel volumes are measured in correct quantities through the idling circuit. Then by revving up the engine, boost is created and the additional fuel metering valves are then activated via the boost sensors.
When you consider that this motor takes, in a 12-second run, about 4.5 gallons of alcohol, it sounds pretty big, but it takes it all. And there's no raw alcohol coming out of the stack.
It's all being burnt?
It's all being burned and making horsepower on it.
So with all that fuel going in, you must need a lot of air to burn with the alcohol?
Yes, for the air we use 3 turbochargers in 2 stages. For example, this turbocharger, the size of the intake wheel is close to 4 inch. The total amount of air we can control that by a wastegate, setting up the wastegate higher or lower.
Compared to a diesel engine then, how much boost are you running with this alcohol tractor?
At this moment, Jeff, we run about 55 pounds of boost, that's 3.6 bar boost pressure. And we can go up to about 75 pounds of boost. After that we start having problems with detonation.
Willem, how do you keep the engine cool? I see you have no radiator on this engine.
No, you're right. There's no radiator on it because we put so much alcohol in our motor that it doesn't heat up at all. And even after a run, you just can put your hands on the head, no problem. It's just nice and warm.
And the block's dry, no water in the block?
Yeah, no water in the block. You just can even touch the sleeves here. You have to realize that alcohol's boiling point is 65 degrees. So when you go from when you go from liquid to vapor, it withdraws so much heat out of the surrounding area that the head and everything stays cool.
Do you use a standard lubrication system with this engine?
No, we have a special designed lubrication system. For start, we have a big oil sump that contains more oil than a stock oil sump, so we have enough oil on the pickup points when we are high in the air, let's say 6 feet in the air. The oil pump is a big, with a 3-stage Weaver oil pump. It's built for dragsters. It has 2 sections. These 2 sections are for the motor. The first section is for the turbochargers. We have for the turbochargers a special oil circuit, its own sump that you see over there. So we have no mixture of motor oil and alcohol going through the turbochargers.
So is there an advantage in oil pressure terms by running a pump system like this?
Yes, we think so, because we can run higher oil pressure in the turbochargers and cool them down faster than what we run in the motor.
And is your engine oil pressure higher than a factory tractor would be?
Oh yes, it's about close to 3 times higher. Because the main reason for that is because when we carry aluminum rods in this motor, and when you heat up those aluminum rods till around 65 or 75 degrees, you nearly double the oil clearance. So you have to have a lot of oil to keep
the bearings lubricated?
Yep. And that's not necessary for the first run, but for the second run it's really important. And we did some checking last winter and we found out that it is nearly not possible to make 3 runs, especially not in a row.
The clearance would be so much,
yes,
that you'd wear the bearings out?
Yep.
Can you burn alcohol using ordinary diesel pistons?
Oh yes, no problem. I know a guy in Indiana who's doing it, but it's a matter of fact, it's wasting horsepower because you have so much moving weight going around that there is no need to have it so heavy that we build our own components using a lightweight piston, BRC piston, and the lightweight homemade aluminum rod. Just weighs about, I think, 25% of the total weight of this unit. And you have to consider that it can be lighter because diesel acts like when you have this piston in top dead center and you hit it with a 40 kilo hammer. And after you have hit it, it's over. And this thing burns nice and slow. It starts burning at just before top dead center and it burns a long way down. The only disadvantage is this thing has less torque than this one. Diesel has way more torque than an alcohol motor.
So you need more revs with an alcohol motor?
Yeah, but it makes more revs because the whole process is to make more RPMs.
So there's no need to run a girdle on the bottom of this engine for extra strength?
No, we don't use a girdle. We only build for this motor steel main caps and line board the whole block again. So
compared to your earlier diesel engine, how much horsepower do you think this engine produces on alcohol?
I think we are close to 2,200, 2,400.
And how does that compare to your diesel engine?
Our diesel engine never came over 1,200, 1,400.
So it's a tremendous boost in power you've gained.
Yep.
There's no doubting the ability of an alcohol engine to produce power, much more than that of a diesel engine. The most powerful machines on the tractor pulling circuit can be found in the modified division. Here, tractors use single and multi-engine configurations, with engines sourced from aeroplanes, tanks, motor torpedo boats and automotive applications where extremely powerful, lightweight engines can be found. Obviously, the emphasis here is on maximum power. It seems that in recent years, the V12 Allison engine tractor has become a very popular machine on the modified circuit. Although Rolls-Royce V12 Griffon engines and Chevrolet V8 engines are also well favoured for their high power outputs. The first Allison engine tractor to cross the Atlantic is now in the hands of Jim Snell from Newton Abbot in Devon, and until quite recently has been known as Starlight Express 2. With two 28-litre V12 Allison engines and running on methanol fuel, Starlight 2 generates in total around 5,000 horsepower. But the tractor's dated design has left Jim short of power, especially in the 4.4 tonne modified class, against the powerful V8 Arias, Chevrolet and Rolls-Royce Griffon engine tractors. So a completely new chassis has been built, but not only for better weight distribution. This new chassis has also been designed to take a third Allison engine, which can be conveniently fitted and removed to make the tractor extremely competitive in the 4.4 tonne class. Jim, you've run this tractor now for several years. What made you decide to go ahead and build a completely new chassis?
Basically, the design of the old tractor chassis was quite a few years out of date now. The old Starlight 2 chassis was built originally in the States back in the early 80s. Very successful, very competitive in its day, but the chassis design is way out of date now. The actual chassis is much too rigid. Over the last couple of seasons, we've been suffering from veering off to the side of the track problems. In order to eliminate this problem, we've decided to build a new chassis out of chrome moly, which is very flexible, as you know. Hopefully this is going to help cure our problem.
How essential is flexibility in a chassis design?
Well, very, very essential, Jeff. You need to concentrate all your power through your back wheels together. Get all your power locking into the track together. Without the flexibility of a chrome moly chassis, you will get the one wheel will be trying to lift off the track. The chassis will start to twist if it's a rigid chassis, and it will be trying to lift one wheel off the ground. Hence, you start to veer off to the side of the track. With the chrome moly, the chassis absorbs the twisting and hopefully keeps the back wheels locked into the track.
The chromoly is of the type used in most aircraft. After flexing, it will return back to its normal shape. The design of the chassis has to counteract the forces of the two engines as they rotate in different directions. 7,500 horsepower is going to produce a lot of torque, and it's going to put a lot of twist on this chassis.
Yeah, it's a lot of power, and yes, it will put a lot of twist on the chassis, but we hopefully are going to reduce the amount of twist in the chassis by running a left-arm rotation motor and a right-arm rotation motor. If they were both running the same direction, you would get a lot of what we call torque up on the chassis. But Allison manufacture a left-arm and a right-arm rotation motor. Hopefully this is going to counteract too much torque up on the chassis when we're running the two motors.
And what about running the third engine up in the middle?
The third engine is going to be running in a clockwise direction, so we'll be running 2 clockwise, 1 anti-clockwise. Because that engine runs down through the centre of the chassis, that shouldn't affect the amount of torque up we're going to get on the chassis.
So how's Jim going to get all this power to the back axle?
Right, the power is transmitted from one engine will be sat here, driving through that cog there. The other engine will be sat here, driving through this cog here. There's 8 gears inside this cross box, which has been specially made to accept all these gears. You may see that there's a scoop out of the top of it there. That's designed so that the top engine, the clutch housing, will sit in there, and it doesn't foul up in the actual cross box when you lift it on and off. One engine has got a clockwise direction, and the other engine has got an anti-clockwise direction, hence the extra idler gear, which you see there. The power is brought from outside across the cross box and into that centre output shaft, which is there. That sends the power through, out the cross box, into the drop box, and then out the drop box and into the main gearbox, which is behind that. As the rules and regulations stand at the moment, you're only allowed to use 2 engines in the 3.4 class, but we are allowed to use 3 in the 4.4 class. So in the 3.4 class, we need to remove the top engine, which is done by removing a series of bolts around this drop box. Bearing in mind, this drop box will be bolted to the back of the engine. The engine will sit up about this height. So when we've removed a series of bolts around there, this box and the engine will be lifted off and removed. Then we're left with an open drop box. So we have to put an aluminium cover across there to keep the oil in whilst we run with the 2 engines.
It's rather a big drop box for such small gears.
Yeah, the reason for this, Jeff, is there may be very small gears in the bottom of the drop box, but it's a very big gear that drives those small gears. Now, the reason for this is because we use aircraft engines, and aircraft engines don't rev nowhere near as much as these supercharged Chevys and automotive engines. So we need very, very high wheel speed, and the only way we can get the high wheel speed is to get very, very fast shaft speeds into the main gearbox. And the way we achieve this is to have a very, very big gear driving a small gear.
With this gearing and a 3-speed manual gearbox, Jim expects to achieve wheel speeds of over 100 miles per hour. This is one hell of a lump of engine for tractor pulling, Jim, and you're going to use 3 of them. Could you tell me something about it?
Yeah, they're American World War II fighter plane engines, Allison engines they are. They're 28-litre V12 supercharged, all aluminium, very lightweight for the size they are. In standard form, they were running with a carburetor, running on petrol or avgas. We ran them for 1 season with a carburetor and running on avgas, but as the time goes on, you need more and more power, so we converted them to run on methanol. And high-speed superchargers, which give us a lot more power. We're in standard form with a carburetor. These engines were pushing out around about 1,200 to 1,500 horsepower, and we're getting sort of an estimated 2,500 horsepower per engine now. With 3 engines, that's going to be around 7,000 to 7,500 horsepower, and around about 84 litres.
Jim's third engine was being rebuilt, having been imported from the States in various pieces. Mechanics Paul Tucker and Ian Grout have laid out the cylinder heads in preparation before assembly starts.
This one has been bashed about a bit. There's damage on here. Yeah. You couldn't see that until I steamed it off, and it was all covered up with crud. But
is there a right and left on top for them, or not? No. Or are they cast exactly the same?
These are the same.
All the rock covers are the same, yeah.
These blocks are they're marked. That's the right hand. But they made a V. This is a V12. Now they made a V24 engine,
did they?
Allison, and these blocks were used on that as well, because it says there that would have been the left centre block on the V24 engine, and that was a right centre block.
The approximate date that this engine was built was about 1938, and according to its records was overhauled in 1943. Its data plate said that it had only done around 180 hours of flying, and it's thought that it didn't do much running after its overhaul because it was relatively clean. The Allison engine was pretty well advanced for its time, even by today's standards. It had twin overhead camshafts, 4 valves per cylinder, supercharging and hemispherical combustion chambers. All this on an engine designed in the 1930s. Like the other engines used for tractor pulling, some of the components have been strengthened to withstand extra revs. Tell me about the clutches, Jim.
We use a clutch called a Hayes clutch, which is it's got 5 plates in it. It's a centrifugally assisted spring-type clutch. A lot of the pullers use a clutch called a Crower clutch, which is a fully centrifugal clutch. With this type of clutch, you do need to be able to push a pedal out to engage a gear. Some prefer this type of clutch, some prefer the Crower type clutch. This, as you see it now, is on the rear of the engine in a tractor, but when it was in the aircraft, this used to be the front of the engine. This used to drive the propeller. There was a drive in behind this plate which used to drive a shaft, which used to drive the propeller, but now in a tractor we're using it to drive a flywheel and a clutch.
Inside his workshop, where a shiny new Starlight Express is beginning to take shape, Jim explained how the drive from the clutch was attached.
As you can see, there's a spline shaft coming out of the clutch, which is that one there. There'll be an identical shaft like that coming out the end of the cross box. This is a sliding coupler. There'll be one which will slide over the shaft at the clutch, the one that will slide out the one at the cross box. In the centre of the 2 shafts there will be an 8-inch removable spline shaft, which when you pull the 2 couplers together to the centre, one that way and one that way, they'll both drop out the bottom, which will leave us an 8-inch gap in the middle, which will enable us to pull the bellows and the clutch off the engine to be able to adjust it or do any major repairs that need to be doing, other than having to take the engine off the tractor or strip the transmission out. It's just basically easy maintenance on site.
Safety is an important feature for you as a driver and also for the spectators. What safety features are incorporated into a tractor design like this?
One of the main safety factors on an Allison engine or any aircraft engine is one of these things, which is a shadow blanket. This is designed to contain any bits that may fly out the supercharger housing in case of a supercharger exploding. This is made out of 22-ply ballistic nylon. This fits over the supercharger housing in this sort of fashion. It's all clamped together. Bearing in mind you've got an air filter which will stick up here, and this piece goes over the top of the breather.
Lifton in South Devon, a pro stock event but an ideal place to give the new Starlight Express its maiden run. In all, it took the Starlight team almost 12 months to rebuild this tractor, and now it can be appreciated why that chassis had to be so strong. It's come a long way from just a frame in the workshop. And now for the moment of truth. Its very first run with 2 engines, as it would be in the 3.4 ton class. Testing moments for machine and driver. And now for the real test, as the third engine is lowered into position, ready for the 4.4 ton class.
Right, now back again. Whoa. Yeah, push back a bit. Go back that way a bit more. Yeah, whoa. That punch should slot in any second, Jim. Yeah, get the silicone out now. Right, fuel taps. Fuel taps, full. Yeah, all fuel taps on. Right.
But if you thought 3 engines were a handful, then get a load of this. Desperate Dan is owned by Brian Armistead, based near Preston in Lancashire. And his modified tractor gets its power from using 5 Chevrolet V8 engines. They're light, they're also easy to modify, as most parts can be bought off the shelf. And they provide flexibility to the way the Desperate Dan pulling team runs the tractor, but at a price. Brian, what made you compete with a tractor such as this?
Well, the main reason is from when we started off with an old Rolls-Royce diesel, and then we went on to the 3 V12 Jags, and then on to the Griffon, and the second Griffon was alcohol injected turbocharged, and we just really wanted a bit more flexibility, and that's why we really went on to the Chevrolet.
So what weight is the tractor with all 5 engines?
It's actually weighted up for 4.4 in this weight class. We have about 800 pound of manoeuvrable weight, which we can put wherever we want to make it perfectly balanced.
The flexibility of easy engine removal and replacement means that Brian can compete in the lighter 3.4 tonne class just by undoing a few bolts. It only takes about 3 minutes to remove the top engine. And how powerful are these engines?
Well, it's very difficult to say. Depending on how well the pull's going, what gear you're in, what RPMs you're getting. But we've got to say they are around about 1500 horsepower each. When they came over from the States, they were 468s, Chevrolet, methanol injected, with supercharge, of course. Since then we've rebuilt quite a lot of them, and they are all now 527 motors, still stopping on the alcohol injection supercharged.
Have you had to get new blocks, or can you just put another?
Yeah, we have, I'm afraid. We've got quite a lot of all new 527 blocks and all new components. We normally reckon about 80 runs on a motor before we strip them down and throw all the bearings, con rods and pistons, so we don't have any failures on the track.
No doubt these big block engines have got quite a thirst for alcohol fuel then.
Yes, I'm afraid you can't get horsepower without it. On every 100 metre pull, which takes about 8 to 10 seconds, we normally burn about 12 to 13 gallon of methanol
5 engines on.
with 5 motors on, yeah. Each engine has its own fuel pump, metering valve, and its own injection system straight into the blower, straight through the engine and burnt and gone.
Is it quite critical how much fuel you put into one of these engines?
Yes, it is, yeah. If you have them running too lean, even though you get a bit more power, you will find that you have a chance of burning pistons. If you get them too rich, you just flood the motors and you don't get the power. So the air-to-fuel balance is critical, yes.
The alcohol injection system used on the Chevrolet engine injects fuel into the airflow ahead of the supercharger. So fuel and air are mixed thoroughly before entering the engine. And how difficult is it to link 5 engines together like this?
Not too bad, really. It's all done on shafts. There's a flexible drive coupling between the 2 motors. There's a big clutch here, which then goes centre shaft through to the spider box. Now, I only say, what's a spider box? Well, all it is a piece of aluminium with shaft going through the centre with a bevel gear on. And on one side there's a spigot shaft with another bevel gear, and the same on this side. And so the rotation is going the right way for the shaft to go straight through in a line. And these 2 motors just pick up on bevel gear. That's right, yeah. And that then goes straight through to the transmission. The top motor is a self-contained unit, and that just really slots onto the shaft for the bigger weight class.
So all this power then just goes straight into the gearbox?
That's right, yeah. The actual gearbox is a Humco puller box, which is really a fabricated aluminium box, all with fuller commercial gears. Just 4 gears, 1 reverse and 3 forward. and that is then linked through a flexi drive coupling straight into the Rockwell diff.
What sort of wheel speeds can you achieve with this tractor?
Around about 115 mile an hour.
And with such a high wheel speed, it's easy to see how Desperate Dan locks into the track, using friction, to make full use of the tractor power available. So with such a reliable tractor then, Brian, no doubt you've got a few of these to show for your efforts.
Yes, we have quite a few now. We've actually been British 4.4 champion for the last 4 years. We've been European champion in the 3.4 for the last 3 years, and European and British champion last year in the 3.4 and 4.4.
So is it all worth it?
You've got to think so, haven't you?
That's enough for under them. We want to go through.